My wife always said that the universe has a strange way of revealing the truth. I didn't expect it to reveal her affair by literally hitting her and her lover in the middle of the forest. One minute, I thought I was planning a romantic weekend. The next minute, I was getting a call from the hospital. That storm didn't just tear the sky apart, it shattered everything I thought I knew about our marriage. This is the story of how betrayal, karma, and a bizarre act of nature collided to end my marriage. And now I'm going to tell you all about it. They say you just know when you meet the right one. I always thought that was something people said after the fact to make their rushed decisions sound romantic. But when I met Emily, I got it. That feeling hit me like a truck. It was at my buddy Josh's housewarming party, a normal Saturday night, nothing fancy, just beer, bad pizza, and a bunch of folding chairs in a half-furnished living room. I was standing by the cooler, debating if warm beer was worth another round, when I saw her walk in. Black jeans, gray sweater, blonde hair tucked under a beanie. Her laugh hit me before anything else, loud, confident, like she wasn't afraid to take up space. She had this energy, like the room shifted a little to pay attention to her. People noticed her. Not just because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she seemed to carry her own weather. We got to talking over the Doritos bowl. She made some snarky comment about how everyone there looked like they worked in IT or sold insurance, and I laughed because, well, I do work in IT. We ended up sitting on the floor with a couple of other people and talking for hours. It was one of those rare nights where conversation doesn't feel like work. I learned that she worked in marketing, had a minor obsession with old bookstores, and hated cilantro with a passion that bordered on criminal. She told me about hiking trips she took alone, how she felt more grounded in the woods than anywhere else. At the end of the night, I walked her to her car. I asked for her number, and she gave it without hesitation. I remember she smiled in that way that made me feel like I'd just passed a test. I texted her the next morning. I'm usually the type to wait a couple of days, let it breathe, not seem too eager. But with her, waiting felt stupid. She replied in less than a minute. We got dinner 3 nights later at this little Italian place downtown. She wore a red coat and boots and looked like someone out of a movie. We talked for 3 hours and barely touched our food. From there, things moved fast, like, fast. We were seeing each other constantly. She'd come over after work with takeout and fall asleep on the couch halfway through whatever movie we picked. On weekends, we'd drive out to nearby parks, hike trails I didn't know existed, and talk about everything from childhood memories to what scared us most. I met her friends after a few weeks. They were all sharp, loud, polished professionals, people who made me feel like I should have worn better shoes. They seemed surprised I existed. One of them actually asked Emily, right in front of me, "Is this the guy? The one from the party?" She smiled and said, "Yep." He passed the vibe check. I didn't know what that meant, but I liked the sound of it. I introduced her to my circle next. My best friend Ben liked her immediately, which meant a lot. Ben doesn't trust easily. My mom even liked her, which is saying something, considering my mom once told me I had horrific taste in women. Emily made a good impression. We were inseparable. I know people say that kind of thing all the time, but we really were. Her apartment started to feel more like storage, because she was always at mine. Toothbrush, favorite mug, yoga mat rolled up in the corner. Eventually, the question came up, why not just live together? It made financial sense. We were already spending every night together. I had a 2-bedroom. She was paying through the nose to live closer to her office. So she moved in. And then, like 2 fools drunk on serotonin and optimism, we got married 6 months later. No big wedding, no drama. Just a nice lunch with our parents, a few pictures outside under gray skies, and a promise. I remember how she looked that day, simple dress, hair down, that same laugh I heard the first night. I thought, I'm the luckiest damn guy in the world. My cousin Mike said at Wings and Beer, "Bro, you sure about this? Feels quick." My coworker Mandy raised an eyebrow when I mentioned moving in. Already. Even Ben, who liked her, gave me a quiet, just be smart, man. But I didn't listen. I thought, when you know, you know. And I knew. Or at least, I thought I did. About 6 months ago, things between Emily and me started to feel different, though I couldn't put my finger on it right away. At first, I chalked it up to the usual married life stuff. Work stress, bills, routine. Life gets busy. But in hindsight, those early changes were the start of a slow unraveling. Emily had started talking a lot about a new project at work. She worked in marketing for a mid-sized tech company, the kind that prides itself on beanbag chairs, team-building retreats, and calling their staff creatives instead of employees. They had a big client on the hook, and she was paired with a guy named Brandon Miller to lead the campaign. I didn't think much of it at first, until I met him. Brandon came up in conversation almost daily. Brandon said the client's obsessed with TikTok metrics. Or, Brandon stayed late to finish the pitch deck. At first, I figured it was normal. People at work get assigned to teams. You end up talking about whoever's in your orbit. But over time, the way she said his name bugged me. Like she was always smiling when she said it. Like he was a highlight in her day. I finally met the guy at her company's holiday mixer in December. He was tall, with that broad-shouldered build that screams gym rat. He had one of those fake white smiles, straight as a ruler, a little too practiced. His handshake was firm, the kind that lingers half a second too long, like he's testing your grip. I tried to like him, gave him the benefit of the doubt, but something felt slick. He kept touching Emily's arm when they talked. Not full-on groping, but those casual touches people do when they're just a bit too comfortable. I noticed she didn't pull away. After the party, I mentioned it lightly on the drive home. You and Brandon seem pretty tight, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. She rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. Don't be that guy, she said. We're just coworkers. We work closely, that's all. I let it go, but I didn't stop thinking about it. A couple weeks later, I noticed she started bringing her phone to the bathroom. Not just sometimes, every time. Even when she took showers, it was always there. She used to leave it on the charger overnight, but now it was under her pillow. When it buzzed, she'd swipe the screen quickly, smile to herself, and then put it away without a word. When I asked what was so funny, she'd say, "Oh, just a meme," or work drama. Never showed me. Her phone became her shadow. It went where she went. Couch, bathroom, bedroom, kitchen. I'm not someone who snoops. Never have been. I've always believed that if you need to go digging, something's already broken. But I'm not dumb. I noticed the shift. We started spending less time together, too. She'd come home from work later and later, saying they were still in crunch time for the project. Even when she was home, she wasn't really there. I'd talk, and her eyes would stay on the screen. Sometimes I'd ask a question twice before she even looked up. The yoga classes she used to drag me to? She stopped inviting me. Said she was trying a new one with a coworker. When I asked which coworker, she said it didn't matter and walked off. She didn't even say Brandon. It was the way she avoided his name that made it worse. She also started dressing different. Not in a dramatic way, but enough for me to notice. New perfume. Heels for work meetings when she used to live in flats. Some new blouses with lower necklines. She said she just felt like upgrading her style. Maybe she did. Or maybe she was dressing for someone else. At one point, I asked her, gently, if everything was okay with us. She blinked like I'd slapped her. What's that supposed to mean? She asked, arms crossed. I told her I just felt a little distance between us. Her voice went sharp. I'm allowed to have a life outside this house, Matt. I don't need your permission to work hard. That hit me hard. It wasn't just what she said, but how she said it. Like I was accusing her of something I had no right to even think about. It felt like she was emotionally relocating, bit by bit, while still living in our house. Her body was there, but her focus was somewhere else. With someone else. I didn't have proof, not then. But I had that gut feeling, the one that keeps you awake while she sleeps next to you with her back turned. I told myself I was just being paranoid. That maybe the project really was stressful. That people go through phases. But deep down, I already knew. It was early spring when I decided to plan something nice for Emily and me. Things between us had been off for a while. We hadn't been connecting like we used to, and our conversations had turned into short, surface-level exchanges. I kept telling myself it was just work stress. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. So I figured maybe we just needed a change of scenery. Something simple, quiet, and just for the two of us. There's a small lake about 2 hours north of where we live. Not huge, not flashy, but peaceful and tucked away in the woods. I found this cozy A-frame cabin for rent, something out of a travel brochure. Big windows, fireplace, wraparound porch with a view of the water. It wasn't expensive, but it looked like something special. I booked it for the weekend, made a list of groceries to pick up, even borrowed a fishing rod from my neighbor in case we felt like doing something outdoorsy. Emily had always talked about wanting to get away from the city noise, and this felt like the perfect opportunity. I didn't tell her until the Wednesday before, figured the surprise would make it more exciting. She looked up from her laptop and gave me a tight smile when I told her. That sounds sweet, she said, which wasn't exactly the reaction I was hoping for. She hesitated and then said, "Let me double-check what's going on at work. We've got some campaign deadlines coming up, and Brandon's been coordinating things with the client." I remember that name, Brandon, hanging in the air like a sour note. Still, I said okay. I didn't want to make it a thing. I told her we could leave Friday afternoon, so she had time to wrap stuff up at the office. She said she'd try. I packed Thursday night, tossed a few board games into a duffel bag, picked up wine and some snacks I knew she liked. I was looking forward to it more than I realized. I thought maybe this trip would be the reset button we needed. Friday morning, she was quieter than usual while she got ready. I kissed her goodbye and said I'd pick her up from work around 4. She just nodded. At 3:15, I got a text. "Emergency at work. Big mess. I have to stay. I'm sorry. Rain check." I stared at my phone, trying not to jump to conclusions. Stuff happens. Work emergencies aren't uncommon. But still, it felt wrong. She hadn't seemed busy when she left that morning. I called her. No answer. I waited 5 minutes and called again. Straight to voicemail. I sat on the couch for a while, trying to convince myself not to overreact. That's when I remembered Lindsay. Lindsay was one of Emily's oldest friends, went to college together. They weren't as close as they used to be, but they still caught up every now and then. Earlier that week, I had messaged Lindsay to make sure Emily hadn't made other plans. Just in case. At the time, Lindsay had said she hadn't heard of anything. So I messaged her again. "Hey, just checking, did Emily happen to mention that lake trip I told you about?" "No? What trip?" "Was supposed to be this weekend. She said she had to cancel because of work." "Really? I thought she was off today." "She said something earlier about being out of town." That's when the knot in my stomach pulled tight. I opened our online phone bill. We shared a plan, and while I don't usually check the call logs, I knew I could if I needed to. I hadn't looked at them in months. But this time, I did. That morning, before she left for work, she'd received 3 calls from the same number. Brandon Miller's number. I recognized it because he had called once before when they were working late and needed me to bring Emily's charger to the office. Each call had lasted a few minutes. Not just a missed call or a quick exchange. Actual conversations. I felt my hands go cold. I looked at the last few days. Brandon's number came up repeatedly. Early mornings. Late nights. Sometimes even on weekends. I told myself it could still be work. That maybe they were just coordinating the project. But why lie to Lindsay? Why act like she wasn't supposed to be in town? And why hadn't she told me the truth about needing the weekend off in the first place? The wine bottle on the kitchen counter suddenly felt like a joke. The board games in the duffel bag, the fishing rod, the trail maps I printed out, wasted effort. I didn't know what to do next, so I just sat there, staring out the window at our backyard, where nothing moved. I didn't drive up to the lake alone. I just waited, like I was expecting the truth to somehow show up on its own. But all I had at that point was a bad feeling. And the more I tried to ignore it, the heavier it got. One thing Emily and I did early in our marriage, almost by accident, was turn on location sharing through our phones. It started as a safety thing. I had a night job for a while and she used to go hiking alone on weekends, and it gave both of us some peace of mind. We rarely used it. Honestly, I forgot about it most of the time. But after that canceled lake house trip and Lindsay's weird message, it popped into my head like a spark. It was already late afternoon. I was still sitting at home, staring at the bag I had packed for the trip that never happened. My gut told me something was off, worse than I'd let myself believe. So I opened my phone and pulled up the map. It took a second to load. Then it dropped her pin, somewhere deep in the woods, almost 2 hours north. Nowhere near her office. Nowhere near town. No stores, no signs of a city. Just a tiny road curving into forest. I zoomed in and out, thinking maybe it was a glitch. But it wasn't. It was a private property, not a public campground or a resort. Just one cabin out in the middle of nowhere. I stared at the pin for a long time. My mind was racing. I felt a mix of things I still can't fully describe. Confusion, anger, disbelief, and that heavy dread that sits in your chest like a stone. It wasn't just that she lied about working late. It was the detail, the planning, the way she covered her tracks just enough to keep me looking in the wrong direction. I didn't call her. I didn't even text. I just sat there trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do. Drive up there? Wait until she came home and ask her face to face? I didn't want to do something I'd regret in the heat of the moment. I knew I wasn't ready to see her. Not like that. So I waited. The weather turned strange that evening. One of those quick northern storms, the kind that seemed to build out of nowhere. By 9 p.m., the sky had gone that weird greenish-gray, and thunder was starting to rumble in the distance. I had the local weather on low volume, half watching while pacing around the living room. They were talking about sudden lightning, fast-moving systems, and wind gusts near the lakes. I looked back at her location again. Still in the woods. Still at the same damn cabin. I texted her just once. "Storm's heading your way. Everything all right?" No reply. I told myself maybe there was no service. Maybe she was asleep. Maybe she just didn't see it. But I didn't believe any of those things. It was around 10:15 when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick it up, but something told me to. "Hi, is this Matt Carter?" "Yes. This is Tina Daniels. I'm a nurse at North Regional Hospital. Your wife, Emily Carter, has been admitted. She's stable, but has sustained injuries related to a lightning strike. She gave us your number as her emergency contact." I just froze. I didn't know what to say. My brain couldn't even form the right words. The nurse kept talking, explaining what had happened in a calm, practiced tone. They were hiking when the storm came in. Both Emily and another individual were hit by a ground current, likely from a strike on or near the trail. She was brought in conscious, but disoriented and with visible burns. She's currently under observation. The other individual is in critical condition. That phrase, "the other individual," hung in the air. "Do you know who the other person was?" I asked, my voice feeling like it came from someone else. There was a pause on the other end. "We believe his name is Brandon Miller. He was brought in with her." My stomach dropped. I don't remember what I said next. Something polite. Something like, "Thank you, I'm on my way." I ended the call and just stood there for a while, staring at the phone like it was an alien object. Lightning. Of all the things that could have happened, this was not one I ever expected. It was surreal. I couldn't make sense of it. All I knew was that the lie had finally cracked wide open, and in the most bizarre, impossible way. They weren't at work. They weren't on a retreat. They were on a getaway. Together. In a cabin. And now one of them was in the ICU, and the other was asking for me from a hospital bed. I got in my truck and started driving north. Rain on the windshield. Wipers thudding. Just miles of road and headlights and questions I didn't want the answers to. I didn't feel angry on that drive. Not yet. I felt cold. Like my body knew what had happened before my heart was willing to admit it. All the guessing. All the second guessing. All the moments I told myself I was imagining things gone. There was no more doubt now. She was caught. And the sky had done the catching. When I pulled into the hospital parking lot, the place looked washed out under the storm lights. Wet concrete. Red signs glowing in the mist that I still didn't know what I was going to say. Part of me wanted answers. Part of me didn't want to hear a word from her. But I knew I had to see her. If nothing else, I needed to look her in the eye and see if she'd lie to me again. Inside, the nurse at the front desk recognized my name. She walked me to the ICU wing, then led me to a quieter room in the back where they had moved Emily for observation. "She's awake," the nurse said. "Still shaken up, but alert. Try to keep things calm." Calm. Sure. When I walked in, the first thing I noticed was the smell, disinfectant, that sharp sterile scent every hospital has. Then I saw her, sitting up in bed, hooked to monitors, a blanket pulled up to her chest. Her hair was damp, matted to one side. There were burns on her shoulder and upper arm, wrapped in gauze. Her face was pale, eyes puffy like she'd been crying. She looked at me like a deer caught in a spotlight. "Matt," she said, voice small. "You came." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at her. Everything I wanted to say got stuck somewhere between my chest and throat. After a long silence, I finally asked, "Are you okay?" She nodded, then immediately started crying. Not quiet tears, but shaking sobs like something had cracked open inside her. "I didn't know what else to do," she whispered. "I didn't mean for you to find out this way." I didn't respond. Just stood there, watching her fall apart. "I was going to tell you," she said, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "After this weekend. I just needed time to figure out how. I never meant to hurt you like this." I pulled a chair closer, but didn't sit. "How long?" I asked. She looked down. 2 months. Maybe a little more. I nodded once. 2 months. 8 weeks of pretending. 8 weeks of lying. 8 weeks of looking me in the eye and saying everything was fine. She went on, like a dam had broken. "It started small. Late nights at work, talking about stupid things. At first I thought it was just harmless. But then we started spending more time together. He made me feel seen. Like I mattered. And I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. You knew exactly what you were doing, I said, still calm. You lied. Over and over. I know. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. What about the cabin? I asked. You were going to lie about that too? She nodded, ashamed. It was supposed to be just one last weekend. A chance to think, to figure it out. To figure out whether you wanted to keep cheating or just leave me quietly. I didn't think it would end like this, she said, voice cracking. I thought we had time. We ignored the storm warnings. We were on the trail, going up to the overlook, and then it just hit. We didn't even see the flash. Just a noise and heat. Brandon got the worst of it. Is he going to make it? I asked. She shrugged weakly. They said he's still in ICU, breathing on his own now. But he's got nerve damage, burns. They're keeping him under close watch. I felt nothing for him. Not pity. Not anger. Just emptiness. She kept crying. I think this was karma, she said. Like the universe punished us. I don't know. Maybe I deserved it. I didn't answer. I didn't want to comfort her, and I wasn't going to let her wallow either. I just stood there, letting the weight of it all settle into my bones. When I left her room, I didn't slam the door or raise my voice. I just walked out, found the nurse again, and asked if there was somewhere I could leave a bag. I told her I'd be back in the morning. That night, I went to a cheap motel a few miles from the hospital. The kind with a humming vending machine outside and scratchy sheets. I sat on the bed, stared at the ceiling, and thought about everything. The wedding, the hiking trips, the quiet mornings with coffee and old songs. I thought about how much of it was real and how much of it she was just pretending through. The next day, I went home and packed her things. Clothes, books, makeup, even the throw blanket she liked on the couch. It took hours. I folded everything, labeled the boxes, and left a note taped to the top one. Don't come home. I'll have your things sent to the hospital. I need space. Do not contact me. Then I loaded the boxes in my truck and drove them back to the hospital. I asked the front desk to hold them for her until discharge. The woman behind the counter looked at me with quiet sympathy, but didn't ask questions. I left without saying goodbye. She had broken something. Not just my trust, but the whole foundation of what I thought we were. And now I had to live in the wreckage. Alone. I figured that would be it. Clean break. No big scene. I didn't want revenge or some dramatic showdown. I just wanted her gone so I could start putting my head back together. I unfollowed her on everything. For the first few days, it was quiet. I kept my phone on silent and avoided checking messages. I stayed with my buddy Ben for a bit while I figured out my next move. Then, one morning, I opened the front door and found a small potted plant sitting on the welcome mat. There was a card tucked into the dirt. It was written in her handwriting. For healing. Like the forest heals after a fire. No name. No return address. But I knew it was from her. I tossed the plant in the trash. The next day, a book arrived. One I'd mentioned months ago I wanted to read, but never got around to buying. This time, it came with a letter. 3 pages. Handwritten. She said the lightning strike was not an accident, that it had realigned something between us, and that she could feel me, even now, even when we're apart. It read more like a journal entry than a letter, disjointed thoughts, emotional rambles, weird references to fate and energy. I didn't respond. 2 days later, another letter showed up. She said she'd been having dreams where we were back at the lake house I'd booked, but in the dream it was burning and I walked into the fire to find her. She wrote that she woke up crying and knew it meant our souls were bound now more than ever. She said the lightning cleansed them both and that it had opened something in her mind. That's when I started to feel truly uneasy. I called the hospital where she'd been treated and asked if she'd been discharged. She had, a few days prior. They wouldn't say more, and I didn't push. But I had a feeling this wasn't over. The gifts kept coming: crystals, candles, a pair of gloves I'd once lost on a hike. Each came with notes scribbled on paper torn from journals. Her writing got messier with each one. She said she could hear me when I was thinking about her. That the woods where she and Brandon were struck had changed her. That she wasn't just herself anymore. She was part of something older. The final straw came when she showed up at my job. It was just after lunch, middle of the week. I work in IT support for a mid-sized logistics company. The office is on the 3rd floor of a beige building full of cubicles and bad coffee. Security called up to say someone was downstairs asking for me. I figured it was a delivery. But when I walked out to the lobby, she was standing there. Soaked from the rain. No umbrella. Hair stuck to her face. She looked thinner, paler, tired in a way I'd never seen. "Matt," she said, her voice shaking. I asked how she found me. She said she always knew where I was connected, was the word she used. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded paper map, one of those old road atlas ones. On it, she'd circled the spot near the cabin where they were hit. Then she pointed to it. "They weren't supposed to be there," she said. "That place, it's sacred. The spirits are angry. That's why it happened." I just stared at her. People from the office were starting to notice. She kept going, quieter now. "When the lightning hit, I didn't just feel it in my body. I felt it in my mind. Like someone flipped a switch. I see things now. Hear things. I hear you. Even when you're quiet." I stepped back, slowly. Told her she needed to leave. She shook her head, started crying, then just dropped the map on the floor and walked out. That night, I called my friend Eric, who's a lawyer. Told him everything. He didn't even let me finish before saying, "You need to file a cease and desist." Immediately. I hated doing it. Not because she didn't deserve it, she absolutely did, but because this was the woman I married. 3 years ago, we stood in front of a judge, smiled for pictures, signed papers with shaking hands. I never thought I'd be asking a lawyer to make her stop leaving plants and delusions on my porch. Once the letter was delivered, things went quiet. For about a week, I kept my blinds closed, watched every car that slowed down on the street, jumped when the doorbell rang. I wasn't scared of her, not in the way people mean it when they say that, but I was unsettled. She wasn't acting like Emily anymore. She was acting like someone who had broken apart and couldn't find all the pieces. And I didn't know if she even wanted to. About 2 weeks after the cease and desist letter was delivered, things finally started to settle down. No more letters. No weird gifts on my porch. No surprise appearances at work. For the first time in a while, I started to breathe a little easier. I wasn't exactly healed, not even close, but I had a little space to think. Then I got a message from someone named Rachel Adams. At first, I thought it was spam. Just a generic message request in my inbox, no mutual contacts, nothing that rang a bell. But the subject line caught me off guard. "We need to talk about Brandon." I opened it, half out of curiosity and half out of the same numb reflex I'd developed from everything else lately. "Hi, Matt. I'm Brandon Miller's girlfriend." Or, I guess I was. "I just found out about everything. I think we should talk." My first thought was that it had to be a prank. But then I read further. She said she found my name from hospital records after Brandon's accident. When he was moved to recovery, she had access to his phone and started piecing things together. There were messages, photos, even hotel receipts. And more importantly, a string of texts from Emily that made everything crystal clear. We messaged back and forth a bit before deciding to meet in person. We picked a coffee shop across town. Neutral ground. Quiet. I didn't know what to expect walking in. I hadn't even seen a picture of her. She was already sitting at a corner table when I arrived. Mid-30s, sharp-looking, calm expression. She stood when I approached and shook my hand. "Matt." "Yeah." "Rachel?" She nodded, sat down, and let out a sigh like she'd been holding her breath for a week. The first few minutes were awkward. Neither of us knew quite how to start. But once we did, it was like turning on a faucet. She and Brandon had been together for nearly 2 years. Lived together, shared a dog, split groceries, the whole thing. She said she had no idea he was seeing someone else, said he was always good at covering his tracks. Claimed to be working late, same as Emily. Even said he'd made up a client retreat in the North Woods, which, as it turned out, was the same cabin where everything had gone down. She told me that after the lightning strike, she rushed to the hospital thinking she was showing up for her injured boyfriend. Then a nurse casually mentioned Brandon hadn't been hiking alone. That's when things started clicking into place for her. She got his phone, dug into the messages, and found out just how far the lie went. We sat there for almost 2 hours comparing notes. The overlapping work excuses, the late nights, the days they claimed to be on-site for campaigns. All lies. They'd built this entire side relationship under our noses while we were both doing everything to support them. I paid bills. She took care of their dog. We cooked dinners, ran errands, cleaned their clothes while they played pretend with each other. One of the wildest things we found was that Brandon had used Rachel's credit card to reserve that damn cabin. Under his name. She had the receipt. I recognized the date immediately. It was the same weekend I booked the lake house for Emily and me. The same one she bailed on. We just stared at each other across the table when that clicked. It didn't feel good, exactly. But it didn't feel bad either. It felt clear, like someone wiped the fog off the mirror, and for the first time, we could really see what had happened. I thought I was going crazy, Rachel said. Like, maybe I was just missing something obvious. Or being paranoid. I nodded. Same. For weeks I told myself I was imagining things. That I was the problem. That maybe I just wasn't trying hard enough. She looked at me and said, "They're both good at lying." And she was right. Brandon and Emily weren't just impulsive or sloppy. They were calculated. They knew how to say just enough to throw us off. Knew when to play nice, when to pick a fight, when to pretend nothing was wrong. We agreed to keep in touch. Not because we were looking for some kind of emotional crutch, but because it helped knowing someone else understood the exact brand of betrayal we'd both been handed. After we said our goodbyes and I walked back to my truck, I sat there for a while before starting the engine. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel crazy. I didn't feel like the fool who missed every sign. I felt like someone who'd been played by a pair of experts and survived it. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt tired, but clearer, like I was finally standing on solid ground again. And man, what a messed up kind of relief that was. Filing for divorce wasn't something I ever thought. I figured maybe someday down the line, if things got hard or we grew apart, we'd work through it like people are supposed to. That's what marriage is. You stick it out. You don't quit when it gets tough. But what happened with Emily wasn't just tough. It was betrayal layered with lies, topped off with the kind of erratic behavior that made me question whether I ever really knew her at all. I met with my lawyer, Eric, the same friend who helped me send the cease and desist letter. We sat in his office while he looked over everything I brought him, text screenshots, photos of the gifts she left, even the hospital receipts that confirmed she'd been in the woods with Brandon when the lightning hit. I thought he'd be shocked. He wasn't. Said it was one of the strangest situations he'd heard in a while, but far from the worst. She's going to contest this, he said flatly. People like her don't let go easy. He was right. I filed the papers officially. Grounds: irretrievable breakdown. Emily was served a few days later, and sure enough, she responded with a petition to contest. In her filing, she claimed the lightning strike had altered her emotional state, that she was in the process of healing and wanted a chance to rebuild our marriage from a place of truth. It was full of phrases that sounded like they came from a self-help book. Stuff about cosmic timing, personal growth, energetic alignment. It might have been funny if it weren't so sad. In the weeks that followed, things got worse before they got better. She tried contacting me again. New number, burner phone, even messages through people we both knew. At one point, she left a voicemail crying, saying the lightning had given her a second chance at life, and that I was meant to walk it with her. I deleted it without listening to the rest. Meanwhile, her behavior didn't do her any favors. One of the biggest turning points in the court process was when she showed up at my job again. This time not yelling or crying, but passing out little handwritten cards to the receptionists. On them were phrases like, "Matt's heart still beats for me," and "Storms can cleanse, not destroy." The security team escorted her out and filed a report. My boss pulled me aside afterward and said he didn't want to pry, but if I needed time off, it was there for me. Eric used that incident as part of our documentation. We also included the strange letters, the gifts, and a witness statement from a neighbor who saw her pacing outside my apartment late at night a few weeks back. All of it painted a picture of someone who was not only unstable but unwilling to respect boundaries. The hearing date came faster than I expected. I showed up in a blue button-down and slacks that barely fit anymore because I dropped weight over the past month. Emily walked in wearing white. Not courtroom white, like a blouse and blazer. I mean actual white, like she was trying to make some symbolic point. She kept her eyes on the judge the entire time. Her lawyer tried to argue that she wasn't mentally sound at the time of her actions, and that the events following the lightning strike had deeply impacted her judgment. They brought up the trauma and how she was redefining her emotional reality. At one point, her attorney even said the phrase spiritual rebirth. Eric stayed calm, presented our side clean and simple. Facts, dates, behavior. No drama. Just the story as it happened. The judge wasn't impressed with the theatrics. After a short recess, he came back with the ruling. Divorce granted. No alimony. I kept the apartment. Assets divided down the middle, though we didn't have much to split besides some furniture and a joint savings account that had already been emptied by bills. It was over just like that. When I walked out of the courthouse, I didn't feel relieved. Not yet. I felt empty, like someone had turned the volume down on the world. I sat in my truck, stared at the dashboard, and just let the silence sit there. It took a while before I could even turn the key. Since then, I've been seeing a therapist once a week. Her name's Dr. Miller, no relation to Brandon, thank God, and she's been helping me sort through the mess. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to talk to a stranger about my feelings, but honestly, it's the only thing that's kept me sane. There's a lot to untangle, not just what Emily did, but what it made me feel about myself. Some days are better than others. Some days I think about the early months of our marriage when everything still felt real. Other days, I catch myself feeling grateful. Grateful that I found out when I did, before we bought a house or started a family. Grateful that whatever force controls this universe decided to drop a lightning bolt on their romantic weekend and expose the whole damn thing. I still get the occasional "I miss you" message from unknown numbers. I've learned to stop reading them. They always start the same. "Hey, just wondering how you're doing." Or, "I had a dream about you again." I block them and move on. I'm starting to date again. Nothing serious yet. Mostly just testing the waters, trying to remember what it's like to trust someone. I'm a lot more careful now. Not paranoid, just smarter. If the universe really does have a sense of humor, I guess this was its way of showing me I was with the wrong person. And maybe it took a lightning strike to finally get me to see it. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe in karma? Or was this just one hell of a coincidence? If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.